Once upon a time, long, long ago, and far, far away, a boy was born, a boy called Gwion. But his parents, well, they died, and his parents didn't have really any friends or any family to look after the child. And the child became an urchin orphan boy who would wander the streets of the small town and pick up a scrap here and do a favor for someone here. And everywhere he went, he would ask questions. Why is the sky blue? How do the daffodils know to come up now? Why is your nose red? And why does no one go near the big house on the lake? Because it belongs to a wicked witch who would eat you or turn you into a frog. Well, he didn't think much of that because, well, he'd been told so many stories of the things that witches did with naughty children, but he'd been naughty, he'd have to be naughty to survive. And if the witch could get into someone's house, it would have been able to find him in the ditch where he slept, or the shed, or the barn, or wherever it was. Now, one summer's day, without even meaning to, he found himself walking down towards the lake. And when he was down at the lake, he just looked into it, and he thought he might even go for a swim. And he climbed a sort of hazel tree, and he saw a lady walking towards him. And he sort of hid a little bit, and she noticed that she was picking things, or she would reach up into the tree and pick a feather from a nest, or a little piece of moss from somewhere or other. She didn't look like a witch. Maybe she wasn't a witch. She was probably just a woman. But then her eyes glanced over towards his tree, and as the eyes passed over the tree, he felt as though something had got hold of his stomach and scrunched it up and squeezed it. And for the first time, he felt a little bit afraid. But he did so want to see what she was doing, so he sort of peered. And I suppose she probably felt that she was being watched, for suddenly she turned and she stared hard at the hazel tree. And this time he felt his stomach scrunched up so much that he said, "Ah! Who is in the tree? Come out now, you little spies. It's only me, Gwion, back. How dare you spy on me? Do your parents know you are here?" "I don't have any parents." "Well, who looks after you? No one looks. Ah, hello," she said, suddenly smiling in a friendly way. And, well, come here and talk a while. And, well, Gwion, he sort of knew that, well, he had a way of telling things, for sometimes when he was caught stealing a bun at the baker would smile and say, "Oh, you poor thing, you must be hungry. Come and have another one here," and would hold out another one for him, and he would come prepared to take it. And then the baker would smash him around the head and cause him pain and make him realize that he shouldn't come back again. But he felt that he wasn't really being called to in that way. Now, she said, would you like a job? I said, yes, yes, please. She said, I will give you a penny a day and all the food you can eat if you will stir a potion that I'm making for a year and a day. Now, Gwion wasn't really sure how many pennies he would get in a year and a day, but he knew this. He had never had a penny, and a penny was a lot of money. And as for all the food he could eat, he had never had all the food he could eat. But then a thought struck him. He said, the potion's not for turning people into frogs, is it? No, it is not a bad potion, she said. But you must stir it without stopping for a year and a day. Can you do that? Well, yes, well, but supposing I need to go behind a tree. I think she knew what he meant, but said, you won't need to go behind a tree. You're going to go and spy on me. You'll be stirring a pot. No, I don't mean to go and hide in a tree to spy on you. I mean, if I don't know if I need to relieve that. What do you mean? What are you talking about? She knew perfectly well what he was talking about. Spit it out, boy. Spit it out, boy. No, not spitting from my mouth, but from the on the other end. Oh, she said, well, don't worry, because my housekeeper will be there, and she will help from time to time, but you will be the main one. So we went into the big house, into the big kitchen, and were set to stirring. And the housekeeper was very nice, and the housekeeper would come from time to time and would talk to him and would feed him. And he worried that perhaps they were trying to fatten him up for the pot, but he didn't think that was right. And then he thought it was very nice to have enough to eat. And he stirred, and to begin with, it made his arms sore and his bottom sore, but he was used to hard work, and he was not used to all the food he could eat. And he was not used to seeing every day another penny added to the pile. And also, stranger still, he was not used to someone who would answer questions. Both the witch would answer his questions, and the housekeeper, or if they didn't answer it, they'd say, not that one, Gwion. Now, one day when the witch came in from the garden, he saw through the door that the daffodils were coming into flower, and he wondered how they knew to come into flower. And then he remembered that when he was brought in the first time to start the stirring, the daffodils had been coming into flower, so he thought it must be coming up to time. And as he thought of that, he started thinking of what he would do, and thinking of this enormous pile of pennies, and thinking maybe he'd buy a house. He'd certainly be able to buy new clothes and buy all the food he could eat, and certainly he'd like to have a little bit of the rest. And he stopped concentrating on his stirring, and not quite sure how it happened, but he managed to splash a few drops from the potion onto his hand, and it really hurt because it was hot, so he licked it, and it tasted delicious of all the colors in the world. And he knew why it was hot, because it was heated by the fire, and the fire was hot because fire originally came from the great dragon's mouth at the beginning of time. And he knew why the daffodils came out, because the daffodils were coming out drawn by the moon from beneath the soil. And he knew that the potion gave answers to every question in the world. And then he looked looked at it, and from a beautiful rainbow color it had turned into a brown sludge, and it smelt of poo, and he knew that the witch would be very angry. And then he knew that the witch was coming, and he wanted to get out, but of course the doors were always locked. But then he knew there was a key to the locked door hidden in the pot on the dresser. So he found the key and he opened the door and left. And almost as he left from that door, the witch came in the other door, and then he heard an angry scream and he started to run, but he'd never been very good at running, and that was before he'd spent a year and a day sitting, stirring, and eating lots of food, and the witch was running behind him, and he didn't think he could get away, and he wished he had 4 legs. He wished he could run like a hare, and suddenly all his clothes sort of fell off him, and he felt his arms go hairy and turn into legs, and great ears came out of the side of his head, and his teeth stuck out, and he had become a hare, and he hit the ground, and he ran and ran and ran. But then he heard a howling, and looking behind, he saw the witch had become a greyhound and was running and running and getting closer and closer, and he aimed for the lake. And as he got close to the lake, he saw a salmon leaping, and he wished that he could swim like a salmon. And all at once, as he hit the water, his fur became scales, and his arms became fins, and he became a salmon. And he swam. But he heard a noise behind, and looking behind, he saw that the greyhound, the witch, had become an otter. And he dived down as deep as he could, but the otter was gaining on him. So then he headed up to the surface, but he felt the otter nipping at his fins. And as he hit the surface, he saw a crow, and he wished that he could fly like a crow. He wished that he was a crow, and all at once his fins grew feathers and became wings. And he turned into a crow and flew off. But behind him, the otter turned into a hawk and pursued him. He knew he couldn't fly as fast as a hawk, but he thought if he could make the woods, he'd be able to hide. But he saw the hawk circling and going higher and higher, and he knew at any moment now it would close its wings and drop like a stone, and he wouldn't be able to escape. Looking around, he saw he was going across a field of corn, and he thought if he turned himself into a grain of corn, the hawk would not be able to find him. And just as he had this thought, the hawk dropped from the sky like a stone, and as its talons came down to close on him, they closed on nothing as the grain of corn fell to the ground. And as it fell, he laughed and laughed, and he thought, that hawk will never find me. And as the little grain of corn laughed, it was pecked by a little brown hen that had been the hawk. And then the hen turned into the witch and went home, feeling that justice had been done. But from that day on, the witch grew fatter and fatter, until after 9 months, the witch gave birth to a beautiful boy. And this is also why I don't think she was a bad witch, for she certainly wasn't going to eat this child. And it was part of her, and she loved it, but she could never keep it because it had stolen from her. But she didn't want it to die. So she put it in a coracle and put it in a river to float down, where it was found by a prince who called the baby Taliesin. And, well, there are many stories of Taliesin, but that is for another day. But he did live happily ever after. A drink with you all.